it's 2:15, a little after. We'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining today. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. We're still working through the project that we've been undertaking to really bring in curricular coherence to our campus, to our institution, and gearing that towards student success. The title of this, Putting Our House in Order, I don't want to imply that our house wasn't in order before, but it was definitely designed in a way that made a lot of things more difficult. And I'll share a little bit about our institution as we get going and why that's the case. Ultimately, what we'll end up talking today is looking at our initiative to unify our three separate academic catalogs, standardized learning outcomes, aligned program goals across all three campuses. My name is Will Miller. I'm the AVP for Continuous Improvement and Institutional Performance at Embry-Riddle. And if you don't know about Embry-Riddle, we are an aviation and engineering focused institution that has three distinct campuses with different purposes and goals and student bodies, offering the same academic programs in most cases. So our flagship campus is in Daytona Beach, state-of-the-art aviation facilities. We're right off of the Atlantic Ocean. Obviously, we have about 8,000 students at Daytona, and we run associate's degrees through doctoral degrees here. We have a campus in Prescott, Arizona, in the high desert up surrounded by the mountains. And again, still aviation engineering, only about 3,000 students, 3,500 students at Prescott. So a slightly smaller student body, but doing the same things, really teaching students how to fly or be engineers. And then we have our worldwide campus, and our worldwide campus has about 17,000 students currently. And with worldwide, that is a combination of our entirely online programming, along with off-campus instructional sites. And we have about 132 off-campus instructional sites currently. And that includes military bases in the US, military bases overseas, non-military bases in both areas. Our largest off-campus instructional sites in Singapore. We have just under 1,000 students in Singapore that we're training in both the aviation and the aviation business side of the house. Now, with these three campuses, we've historically offered the same academic programming as much as possible on each. Each campus is unique. There are programs that only run on one campus in a lot of cases. It is accredited as one institution, but we have historically maintained three catalogs. And maintaining three catalogs has meant, in some cases, three sets of prefixes, three sets of different course numbers. It's been up to faculty across the campuses to decide if they want to make their curriculum coherent across the multiple campuses, or if it's, in their case, okay to have, maybe we have Engineering 101 in Daytona, and Prescott calls it Engineering 110, and Worldwide calls it Engineering 115, and they each have slightly different prefixes. So it was a lot to manage and cause, lots of potential headaches that we were working to mitigate as best we could. So we set out on this goal to achieve curricular coherence, which was really geared at getting us to one coherent catalog, and avoiding duplication across all of these separate catalogs and the impact that was having on students. So we wanted to get to that coherent curriculum. And by doing that, we wanted to build on the unique strengths of each campus while also helping us just get more efficiency, more seamless operations, and more consistency that would ultimately lead to kind of a stronger, more enhanced curriculum. Most importantly, and we had to stress this throughout, and we'll spend a lot of time today talking about working with faculty on this endeavor and making sure they feel included and making sure that they maintain sense of maintain ownership of the curriculum. It wasn't an effort to force identical curriculum across campuses. And we told them that from the very start when we started these conversations where, if you tell us that this course and this course, even though they read the same or feel like they might be the same, are in fact distinctly different, and there's a purpose behind why, we're not going to make you merge it into one course. So we really tried to continually emphasize what we were and weren't doing this for, to make sure that folks were feeling comfortable and bought into the process, because as we'll talk about, it's a big process. So why do we need to align? Number one for us was really the student impact. We had even internal university transfer problems in the past due to inconsistent course descriptions and learning outcomes, where a student would take a course maybe at Prescott and then transfer to Daytona Beach. And even though Daytona Beach had a course with the exact same name, faculty wouldn't want to give credit because they said it was different in important ways or looked different, or they weren't sure it would actually prepare the student for the next course. And that's confusing to a student. It's confusing to me as an administrator. I've been at Embry-Riddle for almost 2 years. Um, and that was a big thing when I got there was, how are we not accepting these? How are we making those decisions? How are we ensuring that we're taking care of students? So we wanted to do that. We also wanted to make sure students have the opportunity to benefit from specialized courses on different campuses. One of the big differences on our programs is we have some faculty expertise and equipment in Daytona that they don't have at Worldwide. We have the same thing in Prescott. They have the same thing at Worldwide. We have very different faculty, sometimes teaching very specialized courses. And we wanted to make it easier for students to be able to, accentuate what they're learning in their programs with potentially electives from our other campuses and actually encourage that versus wait for it to pop up as an idea, as an individual student might bring to us, and then try to become responsive to it, as opposed to just creating a system and a structure that really brought it into place. Second were faculty challenges. Lots of complications in cross-campus collaboration and faculty communication. And again, that's the goals, objectives of courses, how they're structured, how they're written, how they fit into programs, where they benefit students, where they don't benefit students. We wanted to remove a lot of those potential conflicts. And then institutional risks. We have state authorization in 28 states. SAC-COC, during every review, we have the conversation of, are these 3 separate institutions? Are they one? Is one accreditation appropriate? So it just brings more questions when you sit and say you have 3 catalogs. And in reality, I say we have 3 catalogs. If you go to our website prior to last year, we technically had 4 because of state authorization, well, not state authorizations, international authorizations. The Singaporean government requires that institutions from the US or Australia operating there have separate catalogs. So Singapore had to pull the worldwide catalog, take out only what it was teaching and offering, and put in some special policies to have a 4th catalog, even if it was really a shadow one. So just lots of balls in the air throughout the entire framework. So what was the vision for Coherence? And I think this is an important one. What do we want to get to? Like I said, we wanted to get to a single comprehensive academic catalog. And then also selfishly, I wanted to use this opportunity to get into what we would consider more standardized course descriptions, learning outcomes, and program goals at the course level. And that was a really important one. We wanted to work on program names as well. From a unified catalog perspective, we would have basically the same programs operating on multiple campuses, but because of when they were created, the naming would be ever so slightly different. We had physics on one campus, we had astrophysics, or no, I'm sorry, we had astronomy on one campus, we had astronomy and astrophysics on another. They both taught astrophysics. We were like, let's just go ahead and make it, the program name for all campuses. So we really spent a lot of time looking. And when I get into lessons learned, I promise you, if you want to start a fight on your campus and you have these programs, go talk to Homeland Security folks about whether intelligence should be in their program name. We went for a month battling whether it was appropriate or not to bring program names together over the inclusion of one word. So faculty do get invested and involved in this. We had debates and discussions about prefixes. But we wanted to make sure we got to the unified catalog. Then we wanted to make sure that we aligned the curricula as best we could. Again, so that regardless of which campus a student was on, we're assuring with guardrails that they're getting that same experience. And then student success and equity. How could we push this to strengthen the ERAU brand? How could we make sure students had every opportunity to maximize what they were learning, where they were learning it from, how they were learning it, by ensuring that this was all more cohesive. As we talked to faculty, lots of push on the student success side. And again, these 4 were really important ones. One was to maximize exposure, make sure that we view everything we offer as institution-wide learning opportunities, getting away from language like this is a Prescott thing, this is a worldwide thing, having students be exposed to more diverse ranges of perspectives and experiences. We wanted students to be able to, get to timely completion. One of the things about this was making it easier that if a student needs a course and they are being told on a residential campus they need to wait for the next semester, maybe Worldwide has an 8-week term that's offering and that can help us get out sooner. So all about trying to get them on track as best we could. The consistent learning outcomes. We wanted to maintain academic excellence, but we wanted that to be consistently put in place. And when I say consistent here, and we'll talk about it, but so much of what we had was just what happens as a catalog grows over years of an institution. We had years where we wanted course descriptions one way, and then somebody would change that, and we wouldn't go back and correct the previous ones, but we'd use that standard for all learning outcomes going forward. And different assessment directors with different expectations on course learning outcomes, and different registrars and expectations on course goals. So we really just wanted to, if we were going through this huge endeavor, we wanted to build from scratch as if we didn't have those barriers in place. And then obviously on student success, the seamless transferability. We wanted to make sure that students weren't having to make a case for why a course on one campus should count on another if they're transferring back and forth. Faculty were the most important part of this process. And we'll share why, we'll share how we've worked with faculty, what we've done to help ensure buy-in. But they were by far the most important. Faculty on the curriculum. We're proposing things like changing prefixes, combining courses, rewriting outcomes. And they have to be the ones who ultimately feel more than comfortable in what they're doing with that. So it's been essential for us to make sure that they are routinely feeling as if, not as if, that they are being heard. I mean, it's not a smoke and mirrors thing. We want them to own this. I promise you, as I share how we accomplish this, the people who are helping to come up with draft ideas were not subject matter experts. So we framed it around shared values, student success, academic rigor, reputation, things that we know our faculty care about. And we also tried to really point to direct benefits for faculty: streamlined course development, cross-campus collaboration, opportunities for guest speakers from other campuses. All of those things became reality when previously it's not that they weren't permitted, but nobody really knew that it was a standardized option for anyone to consider, which meant it didn't happen probably as much as it actually could, or as much as it should have, or as much as it would have benefited students. All of those pieces come into play here. Risks. I also don't want anyone to think that we went into this blindly thinking that this was going to be a fun, easy process, because we knew that it was going to be far from that, most likely. One was, the misconception about programs needing to be identical. And this was a really important one for us. What we didn't want to have happen again is faculty thinking that we're saying we want to go to like a lockstep, every program on every campus is the exact same vanilla. We don't take advantage of our expertise or our special skills or our equipment or our location. I mean, you think learning to fly a plane would be easy no matter where you are. If you are a student in Daytona, you have very different struggles than if you're a student in Prescott. Prescott struggles with landing, higher altitude, thinner air. Daytona students struggle with traffic congestion. We don't like students flying over the Atlantic, obviously, which is right where the Daytona Beach runway sends them. We also have restricted airspace. We still have an active bombing run located, not far from where we are in Daytona Beach. So we didn't want them thinking that we were going to forget what makes each campus special in this. We also were in the middle of ongoing web redesign, which we still are. So we had to talk about the fact that this was going to have an impact there. On what they were doing and how they could do it and when they could do it because of our information pulled. The initial opinions and the initial options. So our plan from the beginning was that we, and that's a subcommittee made up of deans and associates deans and the team in my office, would more or less take a first crack at what a coherent curriculum could look like. So we'd take everything on the three campuses, and if it didn't align and we thought it could, we'd suggest, here's a description that we think captures the heart of all of this. And a lot of AI. We'll talk about the AI. Here's the outcomes we think, looking at your two different sets, make the most sense. But we wanted them to realize that that was for them to then tear apart in any way, shape, or form. No feelings would be hurt. But that was a tough sell. Faculty think you're trying to again take over the curriculum as an administrator, which is the exact opposite of what we intended to do. We were just trying to prevent them from having a whole lot of work to do, looking at every syllabus, every course, and figuring this out on a very tight timeline. Obviously, this has an impact on our specialized accreditations. We work with about 14 different specialized accreditors, and we needed to make sure we knew who would be submitting materials, who'd be going through visits, that we had crosswalks built that would explain, you saw transcripts that said this, but this now means that, and making sure that that's all incredibly clear for them to be able to follow and not have that negatively impacted. And then the perception of support. This had been attempted at Embry-Riddle at least 3 previous times in the previous 15 years. And every time it stalled and it died. So we had a lot of faculty at first that were like, are we actually doing this? I'm not going to put time into it right now because all the other times I put a lot of time into it. And then, Maybe it's 3 months later or a year later, somebody comes back and says, oh, we're not actually going to do that anymore. So we needed to make sure we had that risk in mind too. So what we set out to do first was building faculty buy-in. And that involved us, again, going through for about 2,700 courses and utilizing AI to create initial suggestions and a clear roadmap for this. So we built a GPT that ultimately we could go in, give maybe contrasting or conflicting or competing outcomes in course descriptions, and have the GPT help us figure out how can we bring this together into something that seems to reflect what everybody is most interested on. And we shared that openly with faculty. We didn't try to pretend that we had written every single one of these. We didn't try to pretend that, we had disciplinary experts sitting there doing it. We knew that that would be a, tremendous ask. So instead, we kind of took a first cut. That also included working with AI and our subcommittee to figure out, where are the courses that can merge. I'm not an engineer. I'd look at 2 engineering courses and say, the descriptions, the outcomes, and the title tell me that this should be the same course. And occasionally we'd be right, and sometimes we'd be wrong. And then we ultimately needed to share that out with faculty. So we sent it to all faculty, and we basically told them, here's what we're suggesting. And this could be completely wrong. You need to tell us where we're right, where we're wrong. And that got so many positive discussions going on around campus. Courses that we didn't think would align and be coherent as one course, faculty would come back and say, well, this is really the same thing. This is something that you can probably put into the one course and have everything covered. And then we also wanted to make sure we talked about transparency and ownership here. We probably over-communicated with faculty and over-informed faculty about what we were doing and how we were doing it, because I think that was important for them to, again, know that this was really their choice. What we were putting in was going to be their choice. And they knew when we sent them the initial spreadsheets and dashboards, if they wanted to change the outcomes, that was great. The only thing that we enforced was course descriptions had to follow a particular format. Course goals had to follow a particular format. Learning outcomes had to be well written. We needed single action verbs. We needed them to follow a standardized version, and we only needed 4 to 6 course learning outcomes for this project. And when we started it, we had courses on some campuses that were upwards of 30 course learning outcomes. So we had to have the assessment conversation and the faculty control their syllabi. So let's agree on 4 to 6 course outcomes. And if you want to add specific ones when you teach, or a campus wants to add specific ones, or if a individual faculty wants to add particular ones, that's great, and we can do that. But let's really focus on what the course should do for the student for all of these larger purposes. Obviously, a lot of resistance. Even in the early conversations, we'll talk about the timeline, which added to the resistance. But we wanted to make sure the goal standardization of structure, not homogenization of teaching styles or academic freedom. Again, we probably said it almost too much in some cases where, all we're talking about here is the course structure. We don't care about how it's being taught, how you're assessing it, what assignments you're using. We're not standardizing what's happening in the classroom. We're just trying to get agreement from faculty on this course should accomplish this. This student, when leaving this course, should be able to do these things or be ready in this way for these other courses. And that just took a lot of, one-on-one meetings, a lot of department meetings, a lot of program meetings. We showcased success. So as we looked at the early adopters and the ones we went through first, we really spent time showing how this could help and what it could mean. And again, those were just getting us feedback and how we could adjust and adapt and work with them. And then moving quick. We moved really quick on this project, which we'll talk about in a very intentional way. So to create that unified framework, like I said, we did standardized templates. We had guidelines on course descriptions and program goals and student learning outcomes going back to the early 1990s. The problem was they changed at different points and nobody would go back and correct the existing catalog. So I'm sure a lot of you know this pain where you look at your catalog and it's like, I can almost tell you what registrar was here for each of these, or which curriculum chair had dominance, or whatever it might look like. But we wanted to standardize that. So we gave very clear instructions as we built the GPT on how we wanted course descriptions, on how we wanted course goals, and especially on how we wanted course learning outcomes, which gave us a lot of opportunity. And we also were clear that, again, we didn't want to just merge classes to merge them, but we sure did end up combining a lot. I mean, we started this project with about 2,700 courses. And when we got down to the one catalog version, we had just over 2,200. Not all of those were from combining courses or faculty combining courses. A lot of it was faculty using the opportunity to clean up the curriculum. So we had a lot of departments and programs where, if they hadn't offered the course in 5 years, they just axed it there and used this opportunity to really get to what they wanted. We had faculty go through and build through the curriculum process new courses because this exercise led them to recognize they had gaps that they hadn't necessarily seen or hadn't necessarily worked on previously. And again, we used a lot of AI. I mean, manually, this would have taken years and years and years. But with AI, we were able to, again, do a lot quickly and then spend that time spot checking, reading through, making sure things made sense. So we tried to be incredibly uniformed in that. And again, sharing it out with the folks that were there. But faculty had to be involved, obviously. What we didn't want to do is standardize this process to a point where it didn't work for everybody. We know that our 3 campuses are unique. Again, if you look at Daytona Beach, you have a research university, Prescott, some research, a little more liberal arts look and feel in some ways. Worldwide, typically it's 70% adjunct faculty, and it's a lot of experienced folks. It's a lot of retirees. It's a lot of industry background and experience. So we wanted to make sure that we reflected that. So what we ended up doing, and a lot of people weren't thrilled about it, is we basically said that each dean would have their opportunity to run this how they wanted through their colleges. So that's 11 deans, 4 colleges in Daytona, 4 in Prescott, 3 at Worldwide. And they took 11 different ways of doing it, but we didn't want to tell them you must involve every faculty, you must have these meetings. They know their people, they know how they work, they know where the benefits come from. So we had them actually kind of orchestrate it their way. The most typical way was a dean would then include department chairs and program coordinators and have them look at their own. We had some where the deans from the 3 respective colleges would meet themselves first and kind of do a first pass and work through and then get it to their faculty. We had others that the deans did everything and then gave it to associate deans to kind of disseminate and look for pushback. And we were fine with all of that. As long as faculty and the deans felt like they had done their part or been included, it was good. And one of the big things that came out of this was encouraging interdepartmental dialogue and collaboration. So we wanted people even within programs on one campus to start talking about this. And like I said, it led to a lot of positive externalities, positive spillover, because people started having conversations that they hadn't been having previously that took them to and ultimately to a much better place from a learning and success perspective. Consolidating the catalog, any of you on here that have anything to do with your catalog management system, obviously one part of this that was a giant, I don't want to say pain's the wrong word, but trying to get it technologically to work makes it tough when you're going from 3 catalogs into one. You're talking new instances, you're talking where do we build from, who has the biggest impact. As I shared, we have a large online presence, and our worldwide classes follow that model of where they're very well designed with strong instructional design push. They get refreshed every 3 years. Worldwide had historically using 4-letter prefixes. DB and Prescott had used 2. So we went to 4 because we needed to use worldwide where we could, because there is a tangible cost to us changing course prefixes and numbers, because those courses have to be immediately redesigned. So it's a timing issue. It's a how do we get CTLEs and IDDs? How do we not confuse faculty? And then how do we get this to actually happen? And then again, the data integrity on this was huge, especially thinking about historical records, knowing that historical transcripts would now have courses that are not in a current catalog, and making sure we kind of track that. And we wanted to have equity here. We wanted to eliminate disparities in course expectations and outcomes. We wanted to make sure it was a consistent experience. And we kept harping that to faculty, that they needed to be cognizantly aware of sort of where we were and what they were doing, so they could really ultimately see how that would play out. So it led to an improvement in student outcomes. And really quick, I'm going to pull over a dashboard and just kind of show you guys how we presented this to faculty in kind of a finished format, so it would be usable and searchable for them. So ultimately, what you're looking at is just all of our course information that makes up the backbone of our catalog minus prereqs, things of that nature. But you have a proposed course code, which is a new 4-letter prefix and a course number. And then it shows the current courses at Daytona Beach, Prescott, and Worldwide that new course ultimately will consume in some way, shape, or form. Proposed short and long titles that played within the technological limits of the system. Proposed course descriptions in that more standardized format. Proposed course goals in that standardized format. And then proposed course learning outcomes where they were told between 4 and 6. So we tried to give them something clean they could go and look at. And then most importantly, something where, if I'm all of a sudden a DB faculty member and I'm teaching in engineering, I can go in and actually look for my courses and get those to show up, although I just picked a prefix that doesn't exist on Daytona Beach's campus. So now you see, all of the mechanical engineering courses, and they could see what it was becoming. And it's a perfect example. We have this now mechanical 300 course, which is made up of ME 313 at Daytona Beach, ES 324, which was at Prescott, and Mech 313, which is a different course at Worldwide, but they all covered measures and instruments. And faculty have now gone from there being 3, and depending on which catalog a student looks at, not knowing which program or course, they've gone through and they've worked all of those pieces. And engineering is a great example of making full value of this type of process, because they actually took the time to redo course numbers too. And they went to where, the zeros are a certain area, the 10s are a certain area, the 20s are a certain area, the 30s are a certain area. So there's now rhyme and reason and structure behind course numbering, more so than there was before. The 1, 2, 3, and 400 levels obviously had meaning, but they didn't necessarily always put that same type of format in place as they were thinking about the rest of it. So just a sense of what's here. And then we also went through and gave them for final kind of approvals program names. So as a perfect example, let's look here. The new program it's a minor in air traffic management. It's always been air traffic management at Prescott and Worldwide. At DB, it used to be called air traffic control. And when we talked to them, they were like, no, it's really air traffic management. So we were able to kind of rename, same way, we'd have Arabic studies, Arabic and Middle Eastern studies, these unmanned and uncrewed. We had uncrewed aircraft systems applications on one campus, uncrewed aircraft systems at another, uncrewed and autonomous systems at the other. And when we sat down with the faculty from the 3 for this particular minor, they were like, no, it can all be uncrewed and autonomous systems. This all plays out that same way. So, we really tried to put that effort in. And then lastly, program outcomes. Again, same programs, different campuses. Let's make sure program outcomes are identical at this point. We do have a few programs where they are not identical, and they never will be. And typically for those programs, it's because the program on one campus has a different accreditor than a program on the other. So, we have an MS in occupational safety management. And our Daytona Beach campus is not accredited, and our Worldwide campus is accredited. They're ABET accredited. And the DB folks are like, we don't like the ABET outcomes, which again, if you have ABET around, their outcomes are not the most beautiful, but they didn't want to use them. So they basically said, let's just keep our own. And we allowed that. And then some programs, we have tracks on different campuses. So for example, in business administration, Prescott has a fraud examination track because they have some faculty that specialize there. So they have an outcome for their program that focuses on fraud examination that would be inappropriate at DB, but the cores remain completely aligned to make sure that we're giving students that opportunity for coherent understanding of what's there. So with the outcomes, we wanted to have clarity. Obviously, it would be easier for students to know what these courses are bringing. And again, we have plenty of examples where students have started to notice this even in the pre-planning. We haven't officially gone live with this catalog yet, but showing them it's making a lot of sense in terms of it being easier to follow and easier to understand. So when we think about the things that we learned from this, and I think it's stuff that even though, what we're talking about is much more big picture, broad, all-encompassing, looking at, basically redoing 3 catalogs into one catalog. This is stuff that now we have in place for even regular curriculum proposals. We have a more educated group of curriculum committees that are looking for these things and want to maintain that continuity and that similarity and that, again, not standardization of thought, but standardization of format. So we've engaged faculty and kept them engaged. We've made the templates clear. They're consistent. It makes sure that it shows a cohesive, coherent approach. And we've also got them used to the fact that for an administrative burden angle, we're going to use AI on some of this. We taught the GPT what we wanted outcomes to look like. We taught it what we wanted descriptions to look like. And we did that by picking ones, doing it manually, and then uploading it in and saying, we want to be able to go from this to this. And these, you'll notice, have more semicolons, less words, less characters, everything else. And our average course description changed dramatically. Before we started this, the 2,700 courses, our average course description had about 490 characters, and they now have about 195. So we really tried to streamline that to fit the needs that we use our catalog for on our campus. And we've been blunt with them on this is how we've done it, and this is why we've done it, and this is how we can keep this up as we keep going through. The challenges, and I don't think these are unique just to this project for anybody, but one was overcoming the resistance. Timeline-wise, and I haven't said this before, we got the spreadsheet to faculty in September and told them we needed it back by Thanksgiving. We asked them to go quick, and we did that on purpose. We asked them to go quick because, number one of our biggest resistance points was we've done this previous times and it always gets killed and it doesn't happen and it drags on. So we were like, let's give you a tight time frame so that way, you won't have to wonder if that's really happening. You'll know that this is really going on and really occurring. And then we also had to sell at that point that, look, we're going to get you the first draft. We're not asking you between September and November to meet with all your peers on all your campuses and start from scratch. We're asking you to meet with your peers from your other campuses, look at what we've proposed, and then clean it up. And there was plenty of changes that ultimately came in through that discussion process. But it was important to overcome that. And then the insurance of ongoing alignment. So as part of this, we reworked our curricular approach. We've historically had 3 individual campus curriculum committees. We've taken that to, they have the 3, but then they have kind of an oversight committee that just makes sure things remain with coherence. And all of the campuses are now included on the other campuses. So basically, if you're going to put up a proposal for a new course, all 3 campuses will see that during the curricular process, so they can figure out if they want to teach it or not. Is this something we're going to offer right now? Is it not? Is it something where we think about the outcomes differently than you do and we want to talk about how to make that? Is it something where we're offering something today that looks a lot like this and maybe we can combine them versus having them be disparate and being extra work and all of that? So really trying to figure out how we can best manage that and keep it in place. How do you do it? You wanted to start this, how could you really look at the curriculum? And maybe it's not this widespread redoing a catalog. Maybe it's working with a program that wants to just restructure their curriculum or needs to restructure their curriculum. It starts with faculty training, getting faculty on board. Make sure they know catalog guidelines. Make sure they know why we want to align. Make sure they know how to use AI or that you're going to help them with AI so that they can be fully, into the process. So many times when we first sent out the spreadsheets, I had incredibly smart people who know things that I know nothing about, calling me and saying, you combine this course and this course, and I don't think you understand liquid whatever in engineering. And I'm like, I don't understand it at all. You're exactly right. And clearly the AI didn't pull up enough from the existing course description to know it's different. How do we fix it? And they'd be like, oh, it's that easy. And I'm like, yeah, we can make it what you need it to be. We're not saying that we think we're right. We're just trying to get you a starting point, but you have to have trainings in those conversations. Pilot projects, we didn't necessarily pilot just because the drive from our board of trustees and our president was to get this done. But we definitely had programs that were quicker to get stuff back that we could work with first, and work its way through systems and let them see how it works and then take that to other programs and be like, hey, look, these guys have figured it out. Here's how they did it. Do you think that'll actually help at all? Do you think that'll, work for you? Do you think that's an approach that could bring meaning or benefit in some way, shape, or form? And it was all sort of about just waiting to see how they would respond to that. And then there was the data-driven approach. We tried to give them data and show the impacts and show the benefits. And, part of it's you're not going to see some of this data till afterwards. But I mean, even like we're making these things cleaner and easier. We've cut unnecessary characters. We've made it so this is more understandable to the public or an accreditor or a student. And then ultimately, as we go through, actually putting this fully into action, we'll be able to share all kinds of data on how many students are taking advantage of it, how easier is it, how many fewer meetings are we having over inter-university transfers? That will all kind of, again, bubble to the top. And there's a lot of power in this in a unified catalog. I never truly appreciated the power of a catalog at my previous institutions until I got to Embry-Riddle and I had three that, they didn't conflict anywhere. But they highlighted different things and were formatted just differently enough that you'd be like, is this really coherent? No, probably not. So it really gives you a consistent, transparent academic experience. And it's incredibly transparent. I mean, if you look at the design of the new catalog that will come out with this, we have all the courses, and then we let students know, is this offered at DB, Prescott, Worldwide? Um, and we have courses that came up during this process where they hadn't been offered in, for example, human factors in Prescott. They have a human factors program. They hadn't really looked at the DB program. And all of a sudden they were like, we want to add this. We can teach that. Let's take these 5 and start bringing them into our program as well. And then the equity and efficiency. It guarantees the equity that it doesn't matter what campus you go to, you should have the same exposure and same opportunities, which has always been the case. It just might not feel that way because there's things in one catalog that's not in another. And then that should also, ultimately help us with, efficient academic operations because it's a lot cleaner to use now being in one catalog versus 3. I can tell you as a SAC-COC liaison and the person who writes most of the report, I'm thrilled because I will no longer have to copy language from 3 catalogs to show we're doing something. It'll all be in one. I mean, just there alone, that will save hours. Maybe not on the writing side, but on the uploading of artifacts, etc. Everything will be simpler. It was very much a collaborative effort, and it has to be a collaborative effort. The engagement has to be there. And I'm emphasizing faculty a lot at this conference because obviously with SLOs and with coaches, it's a lot of working with faculty. You also have to be really engaged with the staff side because, registrar staff, advisors, IT, advisors especially, we had to make sure we have workflows for them and they know degree plans and they know this course is now this, so that when they're advising, they're not sending students back down a path that no longer maybe is present in the same way, shape, or form that it was before. Open communication, owning concerns, addressing concerns. One of our biggest debates that came out in this was related to lab sciences. So we had faculty on residential campuses that were concerned about students taking physics courses, for example, at the Worldwide campus, which uses virtual labs and then transferring that back into Daytona. So we had to have a lot of time talking about what that looks like and the pedagogy. And we ultimately ended up putting Daytona Beach physics faculty into Worldwide courses so that they could experience the Worldwide course and see if they felt comfortable that students who went through that could come back and succeed in later courses that had on-ground labs. And in some places it did, and in some places it didn't. And it helped us put guardrails onto a new inter-university transfer policy that, attempts to meet the needs of, what faculty want to see, what the administration wants to see, and what's going to help students the most. And then again, leveraging the AI. And like I said, they're not opposed to AI typically, at least not our faculty, but being able to show them, here's what we did and how we did it, they got it. If it gave out stuff that we didn't like how it looked, we'd run it again or we'd take it manually. And we did spot check all of them just to make sure things weren't in there that didn't belong. But as you'd expect, you have things that the AI gets right. You have things that they miss or don't think are as important that faculty realize are, and then they're able to go back in and make sure that that gets adjusted. So it really took us from fragmentation, where we had these disconnected catalogs and pathways that were causing confusion and inefficiency, towards actual alignment. And again, we're not there yet because this hasn't launched. All the groundwork has been done. But this is our ultimate goal, is to get to where it shows one university, which is what we truly are and always have been, versus feeling like 3 separate institutions operating under the same board and finance. So for us, it's about enhancing student success. We will track student outcomes through this. We will be better able to look at the impact of what courses are taken at Worldwide versus on ground and see the impact it might have on later learning outcomes or retention or grad rates or even student satisfaction. It helped us with streamlined operations. It's really helping us bring forward, administrative processes that make sense. It's enhanced our efficiency, and it will be harder with the guardrails we've put in place in the curriculum process to fall off of this catalog. That was my thought the whole time we were doing this. And I'm like, geez, what's going to happen 2 years from now? How do we make sure stuff doesn't start coming through the curricular process that moves us away from coherence? How do we avoid the bad course descriptions or the poorly formatted learning outcomes? So we have much stronger oversight and involvement to keep this clean so that we don't have to do it again. And we can't do it again with me there, because that's the one thing I kept promising faculty was, if we do this right now, we won't have to do this again. We won't have to keep going back. We won't have to think about ultimately what this looks like. We'll be able to drive it home. And then also stronger reputation. I mean, it just beefs up our reputation when we can show everything that's being done across all 3 campuses in one place, rather than having it be, again, kind of siloed into that campus. So for example, last year, Prescott was our only campus that did helicopters. So if you looked at DB, you might be like, oh, wow, Embry-Riddle doesn't do anything with helicopters. But we actually do. We just don't do it at Daytona Beach. Now in one catalog, you'd see, oh, we do that here. Or unmanned systems. Maybe you don't think there's a law enforcement focus, but we actually have courses at Worldwide that focus on the law enforcement side of unmanned systems and uncrewed systems, sorry. So it's there, and it just makes that feel more robust, and it opens doors for students, and it opens doors for industries to see everything we're sort of capable of. And it also honestly helps us, Daytona Beach is where our admin is. Faculty at Prescott and Worldwide occasionally feel like they're the, kind of the forgotten stepchildren, I guess. This really helps to show that, no, there's good stuff going on everywhere, which has already helped us from an advancement angle in getting resources to those campuses to build up different things. Daytona Beach had historically had one of the best flight simulation centers in the world, if not the best in the world. Prescott, after going through, not this exact process, but similarly looking at what's working and not working, has now built an even nicer simulator. And they now, through this process, were able to add 8 or 9 additional courses because of the technology they now have available. So we've really tried to make sure that this has that spillover, that it's not just being viewed as a bureaucratic, we're doing this to have one catalog type of approach, but instead be viewed more broadly as we're really trying to show that this is one university. So I've left us, I think, about 15 minutes. I'd love to take questions or talk more about pieces of interest or whatever folks might be interested in hearing about. If people want, you can feel free to unmute and ask. You can put it in the chat. I'm not seeing any, but I'll get this slide up there. With my email, will.miller@erau.edu. Like I said, if anybody wants to reach out and talk about engaging faculty and how to work through this type of process or administratively approach or get buy-in, I'd be happy to do that at any point. I think we've definitely learned some lessons that others could learn from and avoid some of the pitfalls that we face as we work through it. All right, well, thanks everybody.